I'll never forget the sound of that door snapping off its hinges at 1 a.m. One second, we were half asleep in our cabin. The next, a man in black boots and a badge was screaming at us to comply. Only that badge? It wasn't real. And, in the middle of that chaos, my 13-year-old son did something I never thought he'd have to do. He opened fire. If you think this sounds like a movie, I wish it was. This story isn't fiction. It happened to my family just a few months ago during what was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway. And trust me, what you're about to hear will make you rethink every so-called safe neighborhood you've ever stayed in. So grab a seat, because this gets crazy fast. It all started when my wife suggested a quiet weekend away from the chaos of city life. We'd been grinding nonstop for months, juggling work, school, and everything in between. The idea of a secluded cabin in the mountains sounded like paradise, a chance to disconnect, breathe fresh air, and maybe even see some stars. The cabin was beautiful, tucked deep into a wooded area about 2 hours from the nearest big city. It wasn't completely isolated. There were other cabins scattered around, but far enough that the nights were pitch black and the only sounds were crickets and the occasional rustle of wildlife. Perfect for peace of mind, right? Or so we thought. The place had an HOA, which honestly felt odd for such a rustic location, but they promised security patrols and maintenance, so we didn't think much of it. When we checked in, the property manager handed us a packet of rules and told us to expect occasional HOA visits to ensure compliance. That line would later haunt me. The first day was amazing. We grilled outside, laughed around the fire pit, and my 13-year-old son, Ethan, explored the trails with his BB gun strapped across his back like he was some mini survivalist. He'd been begging for a real hunting trip for months, so this was his dream weekend. Night fell, and the cabin felt cozy. The wood stove crackled as we played cards and sipped hot cocoa. There was a sense of security in that little wooden box, even though, looking back, we were completely vulnerable. I tucked Ethan in around 10 p.m. He was exhausted from hiking and knocked out almost immediately. My wife and I stayed up a bit longer, watching a movie on my laptop before turning in ourselves. Everything felt perfect. Little did we know, someone was already watching us. Earlier that afternoon, I'd noticed something weird. A white SUV parked a little too long at the edge of the property. It wasn't one of the vehicles listed in the rental agreement, and when I walked outside to get a better look, it drove off slowly, almost like it didn't want to be noticed. Later, when I went to grab firewood, there was a paper taped to our door. It looked like an official notice, something about violation of HOA guidelines, inspection required. I laughed it off, figuring it was a mix-up, and tossed it aside. But then, around 11:30 p.m., I thought I heard footsteps outside. Not animals. These were heavy, deliberate steps crunching on the gravel driveway. I froze and listened. Then nothing. Just silence, so thick it made my ears ring that I tried to convince myself it was paranoia. We were in the middle of nowhere, right? Who would bother us out here? If only I'd trusted my gut and called someone. Then by 12:45 a.m., the cabin was dead quiet. My wife was asleep beside me, and I had just started to drift off when there was a sharp bang on the front door. At first, I thought it was wind or a branch. But then came a voice. HOA security. Open up for an inspection. I shot up in bed, my heart slamming against my ribs. What kind of HOA does an inspection at 1 in the morning? Another bang, harder this time. Open the door now, or we'll enter. My wife sat up, whispering, "What's going on?" I told her to stay quiet as I grabbed my phone. No service. 0 bars. I peeked through the window by the door. A man stood there in a black uniform with a badge shining in the porch light. Behind him, I saw the same white SUV from earlier. I cracked the window and shouted, "It's 1 a.m. What the hell do you want?" He barked back, "Routine inspection. HOA guidelines. Open the door now." Everything about it felt wrong. The tone, the timing, the way his hand kept twitching near his hip like he had a weapon. I told him to leave. But before I could finish, the door exploded inward with a splintering crack. My wife screamed. The man stormed in, gun in hand, yelling for us to get on the ground. That's when Ethan appeared at the hallway entrance, wide-eyed, clutching the rifle we'd brought for safety. The man swung toward Ethan, shouting, "Drop it." His voice was sharp, commanding, but there was no police insignia, no body cam, nothing official. Ethan froze, his hands shaking so hard the barrel wobbled. My instincts kicked in. I yelled, "Run!" But it was too late. The intruder lunged toward him, and then bang! The sound was deafening inside that tiny cabin. For a split second, time stopped. The man staggered, clutching his shoulder, and collapsed against the wall. His gun clattered to the floor. Ethan dropped the rifle, sobbing uncontrollably. I pulled him into my arms as my wife scrambled to grab the gun from the floor. The man groaned, cursing through his teeth. That's when I saw it. The badge hanging from his chest was plastic, a cheap fake that he wasn't HOA. He wasn't security. He was a predator. I kept pressure on the guy's shoulder while screaming at my wife to dial 911. The call finally went through when she ran outside for a signal. Within 15 minutes, sheriff's deputies arrived. They handcuffed the intruder and confirmed what I feared. He wasn't HOA security. He was a local ex-con who'd been posing as an HOA enforcer to rob vacation cabins. He had zip ties in his pocket. If Ethan hadn't acted, we might not be alive. The deputies praised him, but Ethan couldn't stop shaking. He kept saying, "Dad, I didn't want to. I just wanted to protect us." That night changed everything for us that I never thought we'd face something like this in a place that promised safety. It taught me that danger doesn't announce itself. It disguises as authority, as normalcy, until it's too late. Ethan saved our lives. But he also carries that weight now, and that's something I'll never stop trying to help him with. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: trust your instincts, lock your doors, and never open up to someone just because they flash a badge. That we were lucky. Many others aren't.